Hello, nerds! Most of you know how inspired I was by the Ghost Road Theater Company's production of The Bargain and the Butterfly. So you can imagine how exciting it was to sit down with Christel Joy Johnson and Ronnie Clark, two of the company members, to talk about their devised collaborative process and to also meet them as artists and hear their heart and their passion behind this kind of theater. I'm going to start out with something a little just kind of simple right off the top, and that is, how would you define devised theater? I ask this because I think sometimes people don't really know what I'm talking about. I'll be like, I love devised theater. And they're like, what does that mean? And if they want it, to be curious and go look it up, Wikipedia defines it as a form of theater where the script originates not from a writer, but from collaborative, usually improvisatory work by a group of people, usually, but not necessarily the performers. This is similar to commedia dell'arte and street theater, such as busking. So that's what Wikipedia would tell us. What would you guys tell us?
I would say that Wikipedia is not too far.
Not too far.
From at least how we devise theater.
Mm-hmm.
It's always by the performers. That doesn't mean we're always cast necessarily in the piece when we eventually do it, but when we devise it, we all are jumping in and playing each different character. Like in the piece you saw, there was 5 different characters, and each one of us at different times played each character.
Oh, really?
While we're devising. It's never pre-cast or pre-thought. And women don't only improvise women, and men don't only improvise men. So,
that's interesting.
Yeah.
And your company's with six members?
7
total.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have a total of 7, and varying degrees in terms of like when we're devising. Not everybody's available one night, maybe. So maybe it'll just be 4 of us. But we also have a bunch of associate artists that we call upon. So in terms of the devising of this piece, we probably had a total of 10 to 12, maybe 12 different artists, I would guess, because there was 2 that are out of town now that have moved, and then we had some others that just weren't cast or were busy and couldn't be cast.
Mm-hmm.
So,
All right. And then another definition word is, when I went to your website, talked a lot about it's, ensemble based. So how would you define ensemble? What does that mean for Ghost Road?
Well, good. I'm glad you said for Ghost Road, because I feel like that means something different for everybody, and for anyone you talk to, they're probably going to have a slightly different definition. Ensemble devised and ensemble based are pretty similar, and I think Ronnie spoke to some of what that is. We have a core group of people who get together. We usually have, we all create the piece together. Now that said, we usually have someone who is, on our program, we always call them the conceiver director.
Mm-hmm.
I always think of them as the helmer of the project. They're usually the person who comes up with a concept and approaches the group saying, I am really interested in this question, in this piece of literature, whatever that may be, and I want to explore that. And so we all say, yep, let's do it, and we jump in, and as an ensemble, as a group, we start to explore what that is together. I don't know if there's much more elaboration.
No, yeah. I mean, I guess if anything, it just is very specific about the fact, like you said, devised work, and then so what we say when we say ensemble devised, meaning that it is the core people who are generally, or at least some of them end up in the work.
Right.
So that's the ensemble, and our ensemble is 7 strong in terms of full commitment, and then we have associate artists numbering probably 5 to 10, depending on. Who's
depending on the
Right.
project. And we've been around for 6 years, and before that there were many other people who've been involved. I mean, Ghost Road has had a slew of associate artists come in along the way through their years.
Right.
They've been around for about 15 years.
I think it said 95 on the website. Does that sound right?
Sounds about right, yeah.
Yeah, it's
I'm
almost
glad you
20
know.
years. I think it's technically about 20 years.
Oh, holy cow, yeah.
And so the ensemble has changed,
Yeah.
Christel and I weren't members of the ensemble until about 2006.
Okay.
Yeah, when we started working.
But your artistic director, she's been there since the beginning, right? One of the founders.
There were 2 other people along with her who founded the group in '95, and then so they slowly, for no other reason than them just deciding they didn't want to continue forward, not badly, not malicious, no big breakups or anything, but they just kind of fell up, and she just kept going forward with the group and bringing in other people to help her devise pieces.
Awesome. And Bargain on the Butterfly. Now, was that her idea? What I was getting from the website, that she kind of was the one who wanted to explore this. So it was
Yep.
like she brought that to the group, and you guys created from there.
Exactly.
In this case.
Yeah.
Very cool. I love. I mean, everything I've read and everything you guys are saying, and then everything I got to see. I just love the way it's all coming together and working together for the way that you guys create. Okay, so. Since we've done some defining, I'm keeping this interview in the context of the Bargain and the Butterfly, just because that's something that the people who read Theatrical the Narrative heard throughout the month. I know that you guys have done several pieces. You had one that you kind of brought the idea to, Stranger Things.
Yes.
Was that you?
That was the previous piece that we worked on, where I took the role of conceiver director and helmed that piece, basically, and then everybody else became, and Catherine herself was the artistic director and normally our conceiver and director.
Mm-hmm.
She had just been kind of burnt out from the piece that we had done before, because it was a trilogy, so she had really
Yeah.
exhausted all of her energies, and she said,
Break.
well, I want to keep going as a company, I want us to keep creating, but I can't do it. Do you guys have any ideas? And a few of us threw out some ideas, and then the one I pitched was one that everybody ended up liking and wanted to get on board with, so we did that. Yeah.
I'd love to see. It looks really interesting. I would love to see that. Do you think you guys will perform that again in the area?
The intent is to, in the area is always a good question, because our intent is to tour any and all of these pieces that we now have, kind of in our arsenal, which is the trilogy, which was an Oris Dyer remake. And then we also have Stranger Things, which was a kind of imagining of Camus' work, kind of basically that was the inspiration point. So we did that, and then we have this piece, which was the Nathaniel Hawthorne short story, and our point is to tour. So it could depend, if there's local festivals or theaters that would like to, kind of not commission the work, but bring us in to to some festival or whatever they have going, then we would definitely do it again locally, wherever.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that was one of the things that they talked a lot about in American theater this last month, not this month, but before, where they were talking about big repertory theater companies bringing in companies like yours guys' to do stuff. And that's part of the reason Terry wanted to talk to people who are involved in creating stuff. Is that like something that you're so excited about? Is that something that's new, that's opening up, where repertory theaters really are extending that? And do you think you're going to get an opportunity like that with Ghost Road?
Hopefully, at some point in time. I mean, you never can tell. You just put yourself out there, and we always try to see if we can get people from Red Cat or Center Theater Group, different, Boston Court. I mean, any of those places would be fantastic to co-produce with them and put up a piece on their stage. They all do really cool work around town, and I respect them all as artists, and I think the rest of the group does as well. So to be invited would be fantastic. I don't know if that's our main goal.
Right.
Like, we would like to tour. Touring is really one of our main goals. We always want to have a home in LA and do theater here in LA. We love the people that we've met, the artists, and we love being part of such a thriving theater community. LA is fantastic, and we get to create crazy pieces and put them out there and still have support. You can't do that everywhere. And that said, I think it's even regardless of whether or not our company gets to the point where we're being asked to be into regional theater, I think it's fantastic. I mean, we just saw it with Theater Movement Bazaar is another LA company, and they just got put up at the Boston Court. And we have another group of friends who they are writers who they all work together as writers, 4 of them. And then they cast it, and they just got to be at the Kirk Douglas Theater and do a show up there. And so it's really wonderful to see all of these mid-sized theaters who don't necessarily have the means to do larger productions being brought into these houses. And not only that, but then you see the excitement for the regional theater subscription base, the people who go to see that. There's an exposure not only for that company getting new exposure from people, but those people getting exposed to this other kind of theater, which I think is incredibly exciting, because we've been in such a state in American theater now of all of the main, regional theaters and institutions, which used to be groundbreaking, I think have kind of fallen into being an institution,
Right.
and putting things up for subscription base and being a little bit safer. And so isn't that exciting
Yeah.
that that's starting to open up again and that they're starting to get other things and it's not about Christmas Carol and you know what I mean? I think that's incredibly exciting. Heck yeah.
It was exciting to, when I was reading it, I was like
Yeah.
getting all excited about it.
Yeah, I
so-
agree.
Yeah, because they did mention in the article about that the regional theaters are maybe starting to become a little factory-like, and
Yeah.
the artists are starting to feel like that's where they work, and that's not what we do to feel like we work in a factory.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I want to get to back kind of more into the creative process. Now, I read the article that LA Weekly did in July when they were talking about how you don't have a playwright. And in the article, he kind of broke down, like, I guess from his discussion with the company, 3 things that you guys do as you set out, and you've both touched on it a little bit today. The first thing that was mentioned in the article was idea. Like, you're starting with that idea of, and with Bargain and the Butterfly, it was creative genius and neurology, which is a huge sounding idea. One that I, personally was very drawn to because I've often sat there and thought, it's such a fine line between like genius and crazy,
Yeah.
And then just kind of reading from your artistic director, kind of breaking down like that it's dealing with neurology, biogenetics, psychology, genetic anomalies in schizophrenia, the TNT variant. All of these things are so scientific. So how did you go about finding the theater in that?
Good
Well,
question.
it was interesting because, that was definitely a sticking point at some point in our kind of improvisation and development of the piece, is not being, biophysicists or biogeneticists, or whatever it is. We don't have any real, we can read an article and come to our best understanding of what that means, but we didn't have any ability to dig into the science of it all. So what really, what we just chose to focus on, like you do in any theater, is, relationships and points of conflict. How does, having a person who has this condition, how is it, from Annie's point of view, what is it like to try to, relate? And then from other characters' point of view, what is it like to relate to that character that you don't have any, So it kind of just went back. We ended up having to bring it back in focus too. And a lot of our focus has always been not, even if we haven't necessarily said, but as a company, a lot of our pieces have always dealt with family and family interrelation. It definitely has been a predominant theme since we've been working for the last 6 years or so. It's been a predominant theme in everything we've created. But there was points in which we turned to each other after doing an improv and like, I don't know, what do I call that thing? What is that thing supposed to be called? I don't know. What is this?
Yeah,
is
or getting
this
stuck on like, what is that mechanism?
Yeah.
I don't know what the mechanism is. How does the body, So it's like it was really tricky because it's all about the head, but you can't be in your head.
Right.
When we started this process, it was really cool because normally we don't necessarily try to, but I feel like we have a little bit more of a linear story. And not to say this wasn't linear, but and although we have movement and things are integral into it, not as movement-oriented and gestural as this piece. And that was one of our main goals with this piece coming in. And Catherine, set that up right at the beginning. So when we started workshopping this piece, like, we had all read Nathaniel Hawthorne. We had looked at some images and a little bit of music, but then we started to kind of bring those things in, and everything that we did in the beginning was all movement-based. We didn't touch text because we were afraid to go to text, because as soon as you land on text, you get stuck on text, and we knew we knew we wanted to have more physicality in this piece, and so we didn't touch much for text for a number of months into the process, I feel like, and it was like there would maybe be a line, like some of the lines from the play were from the very beginning. It was all movement based, but then it was somewhere in this piece, in this movement piece, you're going to say it's just the germ of something, it's just an idea of something. Oh, now I don't even know my last. It's the start of something. I say this every night. It's the start of something, the germ of an idea. Like, that was from way back in the beginning, before we even started thinking about what text was and that kind of thing, but it was a line to add into movement just so we could play. And we started to look, because the ideas were so huge, we honed it down to like, okay, what is the creator in this world? Who is the creator in this world? Who is the creation? And what is their relationship? And who commands who? And we started to look at a lot of those things, and from that we started to kind of open it up. And then Catherine was like, I have this idea of twins. I think they're twins. There are twins involved in this. And so then you move to the next place and you start to play with the idea of the twins and what is that. And so then we played with twins in the creation. And so rather than it being like they're trying to create a synthetic soul, we didn't necessarily know that for a long while. It was creator creation, and then from that you just start to move and you start to get into it, and then it started to become like, oh, wait a second, holy cow, what if it becomes this? And I don't even think it was the soul at first. We didn't know what that creation was, and then we'd be like, oh, it's this, and I can't remember what ideas we came up with, and it was like, oh no, it's not. nope, it's not that.
Well, for a while
and so then we kind of, it took us a bit to find it.
Yeah, for a while it was, as one of the people. It was one of the characters in the play, a creation or something. Is she creating a person in a way? In a way, is she actually creating her brother, or just trying to do something else? Like, but the problem with that is that Frankenstein and all these other things that are such. Not that they're not subconscious influences, probably, but they were definitely something we wanted to steer clear of. This wasn't a monster creation, or it wasn't a person creation.
Right.
It was more, it was kind of more of a person fix or something, when we ended up coming down to it. And that came out of, in a way, kind of going back to Hawthorne's original story. He's creating a mechanical butterfly, which are two opposites, really. The way a butterfly moves, and how do you get a mechanical object to move that way, right? So he's creating the impossible. Well, what's impossible? There's plenty of scientific and genetic things that are impossible, but we don't know what that is, and we don't know how to, you know what I mean? Like, again, it comes back to that, we're not geneticists, so it became, well, the soul's untouchable. Like, none of us know what it is, but we all are pretty sure it exists. Even if it doesn't, maybe it doesn't, but we're pretty sure it does.
Yeah.
And that's that intangible thing. How do you create that? So that's when we landed on that, we kind of were like,
new set of problems.
Oh,
we knew it was the soul, and then we're like, how do we do that?
Yeah.
Oh my God, yeah.
I have a great idea. I know I had a great idea.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
But because it's so, changeable throughout different people, different cultures, different religions, whatever, it's something that we had freedom to explore.
Yeah.
How can you recreate that? What does it mean to recreate that?
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And and just to say, I usually am somebody who sits there and my brain throws connections. I just like to do that. I never even was thinking about Frankenstein. So you definitely did a good job of not really, at least for me, making that something I was like, oh yeah, Frankenstein at all, And the text, when a friend and I, she went and saw the show actually after she read about it on Theatrical with Nerd.
Oh, wonderful.
She went and caught one of the matinees, I think.
Great.
But she was saying, we were talking about the text and how a lot of times you go to see devised theater and ensemble based, and it's like the plot gets lost or the text gets lost, and it's like the weakest link. And even though you're not seeing something that is about text, even if you don't really like text, it just helps make it make sense if it's done well and it's there. And I think a lot of companies don't have that. But I loved, and I was so mad when I was talking to my friend in our little talk back after the show, because I loved so many of your repetitive lines, but then I couldn't remember them. I was like, what was the line? But the use of those repetitive lines, and I was wondering how that happened, but now that makes sense if you're kind of improvising and you've got this one phrase and you're creating with it, how that can so nicely find a place throughout the pattern.
Yeah.
So
and we help with that, but I have to say a lot of that is Catherine. She goes home, we play. She goes home, whoever the helmer is for the projects, for this one it was her, and transcribes video and goes in and gets. We all have to type up all of our free writes and we send them to her, and she picks and chooses and clones through that and starts to cobble together things and pieces. And so then she'll find this amazing text that you wouldn't have even thought about if you had looked at it or said it once and it was gone. And she brings it back, and then sometimes it's us and sometimes it's her, where it's like, oh my gosh, that's totally the same instance here. Or what if the mother mimics what well, Annie, it'd be more Annie, I guess. What if Annie mimics what the mom had said? Or, and then, but, Catherine, that's also a lot of Catherine. She's really was fantastic at finding cool pieces of text and finding places for them to come back and live again.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely is a talent
Yeah.
to be able to do that. All right, so there was the idea. So now you're having the discussion. It says there's idea and then there's discussion, it said in the article. So when you're going through the discussion, when did the artist of the beautiful find its way into the work? Was it always there from that original idea? Yeah, so that was
from the very beginning.
From the very beginning.
That and the research that Catherine brought to us on the TT variant.
Okay.
That showed. Yeah, exactly. The genetic article that basically had made the discovery or was communicating the discovery that there's a certain genetic variant that has happened with the geniuses, like those who we kind of agree are geniuses, your Albert Einsteins,
right.
What have you.
That's right.
And schizophrenics, so
they have the same variant.
So exactly, they have a similar variant, and so it's basically finding like this aspect of, for a lack of a better way of putting it, a genius, which is probably an accepted madman, and a madman who would be not an accepted madman.
That's
Or whatever, societally speaking, anyway. And they just found that genetically there was this identical kind of combination of genetic codes or whatever. And then, so her thought that she brought to us was, we're entering a point where you probably can start to choose blue hair. Well, blue hair would be cool, actually. Yeah. Blue eyes, blonde hair.
Do that too.
They might.
Yeah.
But you were getting to that point where you could almost make those choices. So what if you want a genius?
Would you be
You'd
willing
be
to
risking,
give that variant to your child, knowing that they could either become a genius and move society forward, or they become a schizophrenic? Would you still give them that variant?
Oh man.
Yeah, and so that was a question straight from the beginning as well for us to have in the idea soup, Yeah.
Absolutely.
I wasn't able to fully. I wish I had thought to read it sooner than I did. I wasn't fully able to read the story, but I did go through it. The Artist of the Beautiful.
Yeah.
So just kind of noticing character names were something that you guys pulled into your piece from there. And then, so was the schizophrenia something you were able to explore a little bit with Annie Owen? Kind of being that, was that something that came into that decision to play with that, being twins? And
well, yeah, I mean, I think that was there pretty early on, that it was, Catherine had the idea of the twins, but that, and it started off being one of the twins was potentially a mad person, one of the twins was a genius, and then further down the road it developed into the fact that one of the twins was in a coma, and so it was Annie and what's inside Annie's head, her version of her brother.
Right.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah, no, it does. I was just reading and trying to piece it, trying to piece it together and then to see what you guys said. So yes, I loved that when I saw in my skim the glass contraption that he has, and then of course you're playing with that little glass contraption. Not playing with, but building the glass contraption in your piece. I just was like, wow, that's a really great way. And a great example of taking something from that story and then finding it in your story.
Right.
How did that happen?
I don't remember specifically, but it did happen in the rehearsal process at some point.
Actually, for that one, we came more from the fact that it was Danforth was a blacksmith, but we're like, he's not a blacksmith in this piece. It's too hard, it's too heavy, it's too earthy. And then so I don't feel like we made the connection to the glass piece in The Artist of the Beautiful, but rather it was like, who is Danforth in this world and what is he doing? And we do so much with the breath and the creation that it was like, well, glass blowing creates, or your breath helps create glass with glass blowing, and it became this beautiful, and then Danforth, rather than being like an earthy, I'm not saying it quite correctly, but he, instead of being an earthbound, like hard kind of person, suddenly he is also an artist and a creator. along with Annie. And so it kind of puts him not at the same level, but in the same world as her, so they can have a connection.
Right.
And
finding a softer side of him, because we also created Danforth that, you know, as a love interest,
Right.
you know, and as opposed to going with playing of the opposites, which you could do, you know, if you wanted to keep him in a, you know, in a very, you know, for lack of a better way of putting it, in a very masculine kind of, you know, job.
Right.
Glass blowing seemed like to be, there's something else in this guy.
Right. It's still like a trade and a skill, but it takes
Absolutely.
the artist. You know, a good an artistic glass blower versus a tradesman glass blower.
now that said,
Exactly.
as I say that, I used to do art medals in college, and I'm always like, blacksmiths are so
Oh, no, of
beautiful
course.
artists.
No, they are. They're incredible. Incredible.
I'm like, I know too many.
Yeah.
But you know,
Yeah.
yeah.
We just think because it's all clang
Yeah.
and heat, but you know, they even looking back. I'm reading I'm reading Game of Thrones right now, and
Nice.
you know, of course, all the swords in there. So they're always talking
Oh,
about the people
yeah.
who make the swords, and I mean, those really were beautiful pieces of
Yeah.
art. You know,
Yeah.
even though they were
One of a
necessary
kind
for
every
that
time
time.
they were done.
Yeah, one of a
absolutely.
kind. But the different metals that you're using and
Oh,
how hot
yeah.
you heat them versus how much you don't heat them, like
Yeah.
that, a dumb person doesn't do that.
No.
It's
No.
not for the dumb
No,
or
no,
the
no.
you know clumsy.
Yeah.
So.
Not at all.
So we kind of touched. I was going to talk a little bit about Danforth and how that character was so different. You answered that question, different, but you know the same. Also, something I got really excited because I loved your aesthetic for the piece. Period. I loved the look and feel of it. The clocks, like I really loved the clocks, and I saw that he's a clockmaker in the.
Right.
So again, was that something kind of early on, or was it like? You're going through, and it's there all of a sudden. It's like, oh yeah, the clocks.
It kind of ended up being something that was pretty early on.
Yeah.
And mainly it ended up, we had a lot of time references and stuff, and even in some of the improvs we do.
Mhm.
Obviously, I think that was inspired by the fact that we'd all read the story, and, you know, so it's in our minds, and it's, you know, so the father is a clockmaker, you know, just kind of flipped, you know, the situation of the story, but yeah, the clockmaker aspect of it definitely was a direct inspiration from, you know, from Hawthorne's piece. And then it carried over in a lot of the improvs we did.
Yeah.
Very cool. And then talking about improvs and movement exercises was mentioned in what I was reading on you guys' page. So what do these look like? Are they Grotowski influenced? Are they kind of the viewpoints? Is it a mix of all
A
of
little
those
bit of
kind
all
of
of it, and
pieces?
some we've found through the years.
Yeah.
You know,
All of us bring slightly different aspects to, you know, to the way we work, or, you know, we'll introduce different things, but definitely
compositions from Anne Bogart's work. We
Right.
definitely do a lot with compositions. That's a big part of us finding our environment and finding the world that we live in. And then, you know, we did some stuff from for finding characters. Well, I cannot think of his name for the life of me right now. When we did like the lane work and we played with lane work in the beginning.
Oh,
with,
yeah.
I can't think of his name for the art. No, crud. Oh man, I can't even give credit where credit is due. But so it's just, you know, it's things that we've all played with in along the way in our own theater experience, and then, you know, some of it we just kind of made up. And when we did Stranger Things, our last piece, I was like, we would do like this freeze tag where someone would propose something and then someone else proposes it, and you look at the negative space. We all know that one, right?
That would be
And
like
so,
Malal
and
kind
so
of
then
stuff.
I was like, well, what happens if we stop and monologue in the middle of that? What comes out when someone suddenly moves in your space and you're put into this position, or you move on to someone? What comes out of that? And so then it became, well, let's try that. And so then we tried that. And so now that's something that's in our repertoire, and we use fairly consistently, you know, to find things. And so, yeah, so we use a decent amount. We definitely utilize other people's techniques and then kind of manipulate them to form our own to whatever suits that particular piece at the time. Because, you know, when you're devising, every piece is its own beast. Like it's all very different in how you approach it and what you do. There are similarities, but they're very different, which is really amazing as an artist. Like I kind of knew that, but I didn't know it. And now I'm like, oh boy, you know, now I really understand that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I mean, we've never really been like a dance oriented group, you know, per se. So we kind of figure out and discover what the moment is for us.
Yeah.
You know, one of the other exercises we've used in the past is like similar to like a Laban kind of work, an effort shape kind of thing that I was introduced to.
I love Laban, yeah.
Years ago from a teacher of mine. I didn't even know it was Laban until somebody mentioned it about a year ago. I'm like, oh, really? I don't know. For me, as far as I'm concerned, it was my teacher who taught it to me.
Right,
You
yeah.
know what I mean? And notes that I took away from class and just never let go because I thought they were very valuable.
Yeah.
So some of his like kind of movement classifications of movement helps us sometimes too. In, figuring out the movement of the characters, the physicality of the characters, which we try to vary in our show too, like so that one character isn't always a certain way. I mean, clearly Annie is often moving in distress or in anxiety and that kind of thing, and the father has a different energy that feeds off of that, or is is a reflection of that. What does that energy do to the father?
Right. Well, it was a really nice contrast when you guys were on stage together, kind of her like frantic, more, manic movement, and then you're kind of very stoic, solid, and seeing, for me, I'm thinking, just seeing how that could drive two people crazy with just one another. To have one person be so, and somebody else, you know how it is when you're really upset and someone's really calm, even though they're being calm to just calm the situation down. You're like, no, freak out with me.
Yeah.
Or vice versa.
There's also a sense of balance.
Exactly.
Not meaning for the viewer, meaning in relationships. I mean, we all know that relationship where the guy is, the guy or the girl, not saying it's just the guy, but it's just like extremely calm, the steady rock, and the girl is the anxiety. Yeah. Or is whichever partner, but it's just like, that's... but it's like, so, it's like that, it's that sense of balance too. So I think they balance each other in some ways as well. And the same thing with, Owen and Annie. I think there was that balance because Owen was not necessarily a rock and stoic, but he still had a very different energy than Annie. It wasn't like a really, like, he was rooted. Yeah. More so. Annie's not rooted. She doesn't know where she is, and she has one thing she's obsessed about, and it's it's a really interesting one. She is interesting. Yeah. No, I really loved her. Like about halfway through, I was like, I love this character, especially when she goes to Danforth and she's got, her idea and just how it's precious, and it was really it really took me in. And then I noticed kind of with Owen that there was kind of this mix of those two energies, but he could be really cruel. Like there were moments where I was like, oh, me too.
Oh, I was like, he's evil.
Yeah. We had to discover that for their relationship and to move that forward and figure that out. I don't think it was necessarily Brian's first choice.
It was and this may be just one of those weird connections you make when you like just read something real fast and then think back to something else you experienced. But I did think it was interesting in the story in The Artist of the Butterfly that
beautiful.
Well, that Peter's character had that moment where he finds the glass piece and is like, oh, you're possessed, or this is evil. Owen kind of had that feel to him a little bit in the play sometimes. It was like, oh,
the Hovenden energy. Yeah.
Oh, very cool to see those things found working both ways. All right, let's see. And finally, so why this kind of theater? Besides the obvious reasons to do this kind of theater, but like, what do you think is it like the bigger difference between theater and film, this kind of theater? Because, let me see if I can phrase this better. Because sometimes people ask me, like, why do you like this kind of theater so much better than, like, a scripted piece or, like, piece done traditionally? And I know, like, my answer is usually, like, because it's the difference between theater and film. To me, it's like a better difference.
As soon as you started to ask that question, my first impulse is always because you cannot see it anywhere else other than theater. Yeah. It's and that's I hope that's true of our pieces. I feel that it is. But and the other people who, scripted or not, I even if it's scripted, that's the theater that I enjoy, and that's the theater I watch. That's the theater I want to be a part of. I want to be a part of the pieces of theater that you can't make into a movie, and you can't, you don't want to see it anywhere else but in the theater with that energy and that space and the lights and just everything else. Like that's what to me makes it so dynamic and amazing. and the energy of anything live, of course. I mean, we're all in the same boat there. Live theater, you just can't beat it. It's amazing, you know, both as a performer and as a audience member. And so for me, that's completely what it is. You can't see it anywhere else.
Well,
It can't be done anywhere else.
And I think it's part of how we create things. It doesn't make us better than anybody else, but it keeps our interest as artists. You know, we want to create something that we wouldn't have created. Like if Christel went home and wrote a play, it's not going to be anything like Ghost Road makes. Same thing as if, you know, Catherine Noon or any of the others of us sat down and wrote our play, it wouldn't be the same thing we'd create together.
Yeah.
So there's that aspect to it too, I think.
Yeah.
But I mean, like how many I've gone and enjoyed many films, or sorry, many plays, and then you read, and the playwright's he's writing for whatever, CSI whatever,
Right.
every week,
Right.
and he just decided to write a play. Well, I mean, and like I said, it's done beautifully. But it's a different kind of creation. They're creating from a different point, from a one-person perspective, from the traditional playwriting perspective, which I entirely respect and love. But we're not a threat to that at all, because we're, in this case, 7 people who do it, and you pick all the other companies that work like us throughout the nation. We're just another way of showing we can create work like this too. We're not better. We're not. We're not worse. We're different, and we're trying to keep theater alive.
Yeah.
And not that they aren't as well. They are. But we want to show how many different ways it can be alive.
Right.
Theater is it's not something where you go and you see, I hate to do this, but it's not like a Neil Simon experience. It doesn't always have to be a Neil Simon experience.
Well, it can be.
Yeah, absolutely, it can
It can always be.
But I'm just saying, yeah.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Film you don't see the same story in film, the same way of
And I have to
telling
say,
stories from the great filmmakers. Theater should be the same way.
for me as an artist, my second answer to that question, it is process oriented, not product. I love product. Who doesn't? I mean, of course it's fantastic to get up and to be able to show this, be like, hey, we created this world. But to sit with a piece and to have it be a humongous puzzle in your life where every night you get together with a group of people whom I entirely respect. And I feel so fortunate to be in this group with these amazing people. And it's like you show up, and for 3.5 hours, however many times you're there, you get to help work on this huge puzzle. You're creating and figuring out what piece goes where, and manipulating and moving, and it's like my brain thrives, my creativity, my heart feels a little bigger. It's so invigorating and amazing to be a part of that process and to have so much process and then to own it completely. By the time it's done, it's like we all did that. It's like there are lines and it's not always the case, and it's not like, yeah, it was me, but you hear it, or it's like, or I hear Ronnie's line and it's exciting, where I just like, I remember that improv. We did that improv, and I remember Ronnie saying that. It was hilarious, and so it's like it's really exciting. It's so exciting to be a part of that. I love scripted stuff. Actually, I would love to have a scripted comedy if anyone wants to cast me in a scripted comedy, because I've played extremely dramatic parts for 6 years. So it's like, I love scripted stuff. I love comedy. I love drama. But it's and it's fun, and it's wonderful, and it's lovely. It's not as alive for me as a human being in so many ways as this type of theater.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. And then finally, I just wanted to kind of ask this also just kind of as a promo for you guys. You do workshops on your process.
We do.
And I didn't know if you maybe, before we wrap it up, just want to mention a little bit about that, or if you guys have another one coming along. We just had a meeting
last night, and we just set the dates for our next workshop is going to be starting June 10th, and it's going to be Monday and Wednesdays for 3 weeks, so there'll be 6 sessions. You can go on to www.ghostroad.org, and we'll have information about the workshops, and there's more information about us and our process, our pieces, everything else on there. And that's about as specific as we have right now. We have to meet and piecemeal everything else together, but we'll start, the basic idea will be, we'll start with some form of literature, poem, or picture, we used paintings and Icarus, the idea of Icarus last time, you know, and we will try to follow that through for the 6th time, so that by the end you really will start to see how these different tools that we use start to form something.
In the past year, we've just started kind of doing workshops here in LA. We have done them when we're on the road and that kind of thing. And we started with just doing an evening workshop, and then realizing that's just not enough time to even touch, even touching it, you know. So then we did a full day workshop, and that was better. And so now the next step we want to do is having people go along with us on a journey of 6 consecutive workshops, create something by the time it's done. You know, I don't know if it's
and
gonna
you
be
don't
something
create
that
with
we
us,
actually,
you guys create, and we're just there to help guide and move them along. So it's like it's a group of people. It's fantastic. It is so amazing.
It sounds awesome.
You just
Wish it was gonna
to
be
be on
here.
the other side is fantastic, because I haven't been a conceiver director, and so to be on the other side and just watch them and help guide them a little bit if they need help, and half the time they don't even need your help, you know, and just watch what people come up with what you put in front of them is incredible. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if I were going to be here, I would be the first one signing up, because I've worked. I'm still kind of in the journey of trying to find a company that does this that I can work with. You know, I think there's always, you got to find the right family.
Yeah. Oh, heck yeah.
And so, but I love this kind of work, and it would be so cool to be able to just to be a fly on the wall and see how it comes together, because I know how much it takes, like how much being open and humble, because you know when you have a really good idea, you want people to love the idea too, but maybe they don't, and so it's this back and forth of like, you know, being open but still being creative, having an opinion, and having to balance that out between 7 people, and come up with something so beautiful at the end. Obviously, you guys know how to do it, so thank you for meeting with me.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah. I hope this interview inspired you guys to get out there, create your own stuff, pursue your passions, and if you're in the LA area, take the opportunity, go work with this amazing group of artists. They're running workshops starting June 10th, as Christel mentioned. There's going to be 6 sessions on Mondays and Wednesdays for 3 weeks. I know that if I weren't going to be in New Zealand, I'd be the first one to sign up for that list, because I have no doubt that you're going to learn amazing things and have an incredible experience. Their website is linked on this page. Check it out for more information. And as always, thanks for stopping by, guys.